web marketing, web design and custom software. Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of In Pit Lane, the Winter Hibernation, coming to you from the In Pit Lane corporate headquarters here beyond the suburban curtain in beautiful Grand Prix City, Melbourne. Well, if you have a look around, the days are getting longer, the blossoms are appearing on the trees. Yes, our hibernation is almost over, and in a couple of weeks' time, In Pit Lane will be back in the studios of RMIT for another edition of In Pit Lane Live. Doc will be back in the studio, we'll have our guests, we'll have our bands. It's going to be great to get back in the studio, I can tell you, because I got to tell you, it's a little lonely here out in the suburbs by myself, so really looking forward to getting out and sharing some fun with you in the next few weeks. Now, on the weekend, I had lots of fun because, like a lot of people, a surprisingly large crowd, I went out to Melbourne's Calder Park because for the first time since about 2008, we saw circuit racing at the Calder Park flat track. We also saw the sight and heard the sounds of NASCAR Style Stockers on the Thunderdome. And we'll be taking you out there a little bit later on in the program to catch up with a couple of the drivers and get their thoughts on the weekend's events. Also, a part of the Victorian Motor Racing Championship were the HyperRacers. This is a local success story that I don't know that mainstream media shouldn't be taking more notice of. They really started out small. John Crook and his son Dean building these cars out in the suburbs for club racing, for track days and that sort of thing. Well, they've just sold a big contingent of these cars to the United States of America, and next year the cars are going to have their very own series and their own championship, and we're going to talk with Dean Crook a little bit about that on the program later. But right now, it has been a big weekend in motorsport. Well, it wasn't a big weekend, it was a weekend, but nonetheless, there's plenty to talk about, as usual, in the In Pit Lane Motorsport News. With Will Brown heading to Triple Eight Racing in 2024, the search for a replacement driver at Erebus has begun, and according to Supercar insiders, that replacement could well be Jack Le Brocq. Speed Cafe are reporting that Le Brocq is currently the team's preferred replacement for Brown, who'll replace Shane Van Gisbergen at Triple Eight Racing when he moves to NASCAR next year. Like Brown and his teammate Brodie Kostecki, Le Brocq seems to have been another driver who's adapted faster to Gen 3 than some others, recently taking a race win for Matt Stone Racing in Darwin. Le Brocq was formerly an Erebus Academy driver, competing with success in its Australian GT program, and was an Enduro co-driver for the team back in 2015. Le Brocq might not be the only departure from Matt Stone Racing at the end of the season, with news that the team's main sponsor, Truck Assist, is unlikely to return. It's believed the company is looking to scale back its involvement in supercars for next year. Well, despite complaints from drivers, including Shane Van Gisbergen, Dunlop will not be producing new tyres for the supercars anytime soon, choosing to stick with its current range of options. Dunlop says it's happy with the performance of its tyres in various conditions after 6 of the 12 events, suggesting that no immediate updates needed. There have been complaints from some drivers that the softs and super softs were too sensitive to heat build-up when the cars were running closely together, quickly losing grip. Speaking on Dale Earnhardt Jr.'s NASCAR podcast, Shane Van Gisbergen was critical of the tyres and the new Gen 3 cars, saying that they had made racing boring. Van Gisbergen was back in the States last weekend racing at Indianapolis. He had his first oval experience at Indianapolis Raceway Park in the Truck Series. He qualified 28th for the 200-lap race and went on to finish in 19th place. On the more familiar territory of the famous track's road course, he finished 10th after starting in 8th place. Brodie Kostecki had a tough weekend after he was forced to start from the rear of the grid after a crash in qualifying. He picked up a number of places to finish in 22nd place. But up front, it was an impressive performance by Michael McDowell that saw him take his second ever NASCAR win. And it's that story that leads this week's In Pit Lane International Wrap. Michael McDowell won the second Cup Series race of his career, winning on the Indy Road course. McDowell worked his way into the lead on lap 6, going on to outlast Chase Elliott and Daniel Suarez. McDowell's win has shaken up the postseason chase. Bubba Wallace finished in the top 20, but strong displays by McDowell, Elliott and Suarez means that his position above the cut line is now far more precarious. McDowell's only other Cup Series win was at the 2021 Daytona 500, but speaking after the race, McDowell said that this arguably means more. McDowell's family, who only attend races they believe he can win, were present to cheer him on and see him punch his ticket into the championship playoffs. While Shane Van Gisbergen failed to repeat his Chicago Street Fight heroics, another Kiwi motorsport legend shows he's still got it. Scott Dixon won his 54th IndyCar race after recovering from a spin on the opening lap. The six-time champion made a late stop under yellow and two more scheduled stops, saving fuel and charging to the front. At one stage he held a 7-second lead over pole sitter Graham Rahal, but despite Rahal closing the gap to less than half a second, he couldn't pass Dixon's Chip Ganassi Racing Honda. Pato O'Ward was third. The win marks Dixon's 19th consecutive year with at least one win in the championship. Dixon's teammate Alex Palou finished 7th, extending his championship lead to 101 points after his closest rival, Joseph Newgarden, was caught up in the first lap incident and finished 25th. Will Power was 6th, with Scott McLaughlin in 8th place. And Top Fuel points leader Justin Ashley continued his impressive season, defeating defending world champion Brittany Force in the final round and picking up his 6th win of the year on Sunday at the NHRA Topeka Nationals at Heartland Motorsports Park. In funny car, Bob Tasker, the third, continued his good form at the track, taking his second straight victory, beating points leader Matt Hagan in the final round. And defending Pro Stock World Champion Erica Rendez kept herself in contention to defend her title after a win over longtime rival Greg Anderson in the final round. Matt Hillier won 2 of the 3 races in the 5th round of the Australian Formula Ford Series held at Sandown last weekend to extend his championship points lead. Alatech Racing's Harrison Sellers also had a good weekend, taking pole for race 1 and then claiming his maiden win in race 2. Hillier's Sonic teammate Jake Santalucia finished 3rd. Richard Davison dominated the Kent class, winning all 3 races. Hillier now has a healthy 67-point lead over Zach Lobko, who had a nightmare weekend at Sandown, finishing in 27th place. And a new era in Australian drag racing begins this weekend up in Queensland as Springmount Raceway, 90 minutes southeast of Cairns, hosts the first Eastern Conference round of the brand new National Sportsman Championship. Part of the newly established National Drag Racing Championship, the event has attracted entrants from far and wide in the hunt for valuable National Championship points. The series will be staged right across the east coast of Australia before a planned grand final at Melbourne's Calder Park in February. And speaking of Calder Park, that's where we're going to take you right after this break, as Calder Park returned to circuit racing for the first time in over 10 years. That's when In Pit Lane returns right after this break. It was a sight that many of us thought we might never see again. The sight and sound of NASCAR Style Stockers running around the famous Calder Park Thunderdome. Albeit at a fairly leisurely pace behind a safety car, but nonetheless for those present, it was a comfortable, pleasing wave of nostalgia, bringing back many memories of long, hot summer Saturday nights spent at the famous circuit.
Yeah, it was great. It was just like brought back so many memories, great memories of the 90s here. Watching as a teenager, the NASCARs under lights, and then subsequently helping on a team, and just brought a lot of those great memories back. And to be able to do it with Zach O'Hara, our category manager, who's worked so hard to get this put together, running around 1-2 side by side was just awesome.
The cars might not have been racing on the Dome, but they were racing on the Calder Park Road circuit, staging its first full-scale race meeting for more than 10 years. The US Style Stock cars were joined by the under 2 litre sports sedans, Nissan Pulsars, Super TT, HyperRacers and the ubiquitous Hyundai XLs. Lots and lots of Hyundai XLs. Many of these cars probably brought young race fans out to the track as spectators back in the day. The appearance of the stock cars were clearly a highlight of the weekend for the small crowd there to see famous cars with a local past and others paying tribute to the legends of NASCAR in the USA.
Yeah, the reason behind the livery on this car, the Monte Carlo, was basically my first car, Chev Lumino, has been painted up in a tribute car to Dale Senior, his 1990 championship winning car. So, yeah, when the fact that this car here has raced against Dale Jr. in his first 2 seasons, basically, yeah, it all fitted to bring the Dale Jr. livery onto this car and have the father-son combination in the team. It was built in 2000 by the Sabco team for Kenny Irwin Jr., who tragically passed away. And it was driven by some unknown drivers in the Winston Cup. We're still to determine that. And then it made its way to Florida, winning a championship in the SCCA series down there before being purchased by Graham Booth and coming to Australia in approximately 2012. Basically, this car is what kicked off the Stock Cars Australia series in around 2013. And then he had it for many years, and then he sold it to Aaron Hills from Sydney. And Aaron's ran it for a couple of years before deciding to do other things. And I was happy enough to be able to do a deal with Aaron earlier in the year and purchase the car.
While Richard's Dale Jr. liveried Monte Carlo might not be the real thing, this is. Terry Wyhoon was one of the sport's most successful local drivers back in the days of the Thunderdome. And the Thunderbird's current owner, Lawrence McKinnon, has brought the car back to its original livery.
It's Terry Wyhoon's old BP car care car, and picked that up in Western Australia from Shane Jordan, who had it, and it's got a bit of history about it. Terry drove it, and then Dick Howe drove it, and a few other people have driven it. So we've got the logbooks and brought it back to the original colours when we painted it, because I wanted to bring it back to the BP car care, because I got the little Matchbox car. And when we were rubbing it back, we got to the green paint, and so we tried to match the paint the best we could, which is what we did. And yeah, it's come up really nice. At the moment, it's just got a street engine in it. It's because I haven't got the race engine finished yet. So yeah, really happy with the way it's presented and going at the moment. So yeah.
You've got a couple of cars running around here that are certainly in the livery of cars that raced at the Thunderdome back in the day. How many of the cars that are out there with you are genuine cars like this one?
I think there's a couple. I know Zach's Repco car is one. I think there was a Kim Jane car. And there's a couple others, I think, that are originals. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure. I'm not really up on all the history of the NASCARs, but yeah, I am. Got a fair bit of history on this one. Got some emails and bits and pieces that came with it. So yeah.
So what attracts you to this sort of category? I mean, you have very limited opportunities to race compared with some other classes around Australia. So why stock cars?
It's a good question. I used to race a Celica GT4 with the Super TTs. I started off with Festival Sporting Cars years ago, and then I thought I needed something bigger than the Celica to fit in. I ended up building an XE Falcon, 1982 model XE Falcon. These guys invited me along to drive it, and they had a muscle division because they were a little bit low on numbers. And I saw the NASCARs and I thought, oh, I've got to have one. Yeah, it's great to have a muscle car, but to have a NASCAR was just pretty special. So Zach told me about this one, came up, and yeah, I bought it from Western Australia, and Shane over there delivered it to Perth, and we brought it over on a truck. And yeah, I've had a lot of people done a lot of work on it since, and yeah, it's not all my doing. It's yeah, lots of friends and people have helped me out. So yeah.
Have you had any input from Terry Wyhoon at all about the car?
I did contact Terry. He was quite busy that day. I contacted him. He was about to go into a podcast, and I sent him a photo of it, and I said I was going to try and get it here to Calder, but I didn't think I was going to be able to make it because we're really tight on time. Like, I'd only driven it for 25 metres before we got it here, so we've had a few teething issues. So we've had to replace the clutch. Yeah, just a few other things have gone wrong with it. So yeah, no, I'd be great for Terry to see it, I think. So I think he'd like to see it.
On track, the Mustang of Scott Nine won all 4 races, but he was pressured all the way by the Austruck contingent, led by Brett Mitchell and Brendan Horrigan. With the current surge of interest in NASCAR here in Australia, thanks to Shane Van Gisbergen's impending Korea move and regular race coverage online, the time seems to be right for these cars to make a local comeback.
You know, when Marcus was racing over there, you know, there was a lot of interest, myself included, you know, following the Winston Cup NASCAR scene and vice versa. You know, Shane winning Chicago, coming back here, there's been a lot of interest in Australian motorsport. And I think the time's right for, you know, the Stock Cars Australia National Series, particularly with Calder reopening, you know, to sort of work in off that, what the guys are doing in the US, you know, and try and get a bit of publicity for us and build as a category and grow. You know, we've got Wakefield was closed. That's looking like it's going to reopen. You know, Wakefield was traditionally the home of where the Stock Cars Australia started. So, yeah, things are looking really positive.
Calder Park, this is just such an iconic location, iconic racetrack. It's a sort of place that the stock cars could really move forward from here. Like I could see that. And with Shane Van Gisbergen over in America doing what he did, I think, you know, and the guys getting into it, I think there is a future for stock cars here in Australia.
You're watching In Pit Lane from Calder Park and the Victorian Motor Racing Championships. When we return, we'll have more from Calder, including the HyperRacers. Don't go away, we'll be right back. Welcome back to In Pit Lane. Well, another feature of the racing out at Calder Park at the Victorian Motor Racing Championships was the HyperRacers. These are wild-looking single-seater track day cars, really, an affordable way for people to go racing in something a little bit faster than their regular road car. Now, the series has really taken off, and in fact next year they will have their own dedicated race series, and also they've broken into the international market. A group of 10 cars have just been sold and are about to be shipped to the United States of America, and already there's a car racing in the United Kingdom and more's to come. So on the weekend, I managed to catch up with Dean Crook from HyperRacer to ask him about the new series, about their international plans for the future, and the expansion of the HyperRacer.
Well, firstly, we're out here at Calder Park for the first race back, which is fantastic, and a huge shout out to the AASA and everyone that's made this happen. But yeah, we're out here with a whole field of HyperRacer X1s, and things are looking big for next year. We've now got a series. It's the Australian HyperRacer Championship. We've got 14 cars contending, not quite that many out here today, but it's getting very competitive up the front, and a lot of guys having a lot of fun and big things to come.
So you mentioned 14 cars. I mean, you're now selling a few of these cars overseas. It's a very small operation. I mean, how big can you make it in terms of the demand? What do you think your limit will be in terms of the number of cars?
Yeah, good question. It is a very small operation. There's three full-time employees. We're ramping up all the time, and yeah, with that, export is happening. So I'll let you know in a year, but it depends on staff. We've just got to keep getting key people, keep getting things made, and but we're flat out and we're trying to make it happen.
Now, as I said, you're selling the car overseas now. Tell us about the situation there. You've got a car racing in England at the moment. You've got cars headed to America. So what's happening?
Yeah, both those things. So a car racing at all the main circuits in the UK at the moment. Silverstone, Brands Hatch, which is awesome. He's getting a good response. And the other big one that's happening at the moment is a batch of 10 cars going to the States. And so we're going to hit the ground running in America with a fleet of cars, and that could be huge.
What do you think the success of the cars is? I mean, they've been made to be affordable, they've made very simple, but nowadays with all of the regulations that are running around, all of the carbon fibre monocoques, I mean, carbon fibre monocoques are wonderfully safe and all the rest of it. They're also very, very expensive to fix up. What do you see as the future? Is it going to be increasingly difficult to get cars like this accepted around the world?
No, I don't think so. It looks like a car like this is very accepted all around the world. Everyone we're talking to at the moment, especially obviously in the UK and the US, has no problem whatsoever with a car of this design. The fact is there's a place in the world for this kind of car at this level of motorsport. There's no denying the advantages of a carbon tub, but there are advantages of a space frame chassis as well. And at this level of motorsport, the main thing that comes with this is cost. And here we are with a bunch of guys all having a lot of fun racing that, quite frankly, wouldn't be in these cars if they were all $300,000 carbon tub cars. So there is a place for this car.
At the moment, you've got drivers, let's say a lot of more mature drivers running around, people who are like out there having fun in these cars. But what about these cars as an alternative pathway for younger drivers? Would you like to see some drivers coming from, say, Formula Ford and other categories jumping in these cars now that you've got a national championship? Will it be easier to attract that sort of young talent?
Absolutely. Well, it's happening now. You're right. We do have a few mature drivers in our field, but the front runners are pretty young guys. Damon Sterling's leading the way for most of the time at the moment. He's 18. Nico French is now in the mix. So the guys up the front are young guys. Damon's a great example because him and his dad Wayne were looking specifically at Formula Ford. That was the next obvious step for them. And they chose our thing because they felt like we were sort of on the way up, and Formula Ford currently is a bit stagnant. No one knows really what's going to happen. And they like the car. Wings and slicks, sounds good, looks good, goes fast, and they chose our thing. So I think that's the way it's going to go at the front of the field at least. And that's not going to eliminate any of the older guys down the back that are having a lot of fun, but the front of the field is going to be attracting young guys, I think, for sure.
You mentioned the look of the cars. I mean, we've mentioned before, I mean, they really do get a lot of attention, particularly from younger people. But the aerodynamics isn't just for looks, is it? I mean, do you think that that's one of the selling points, is that these are a really good handling car?
Absolutely, absolutely. So we've designed an aero car that obviously looks good, but it's making a heap of downforce, but not in a way that makes a knife-edgy, dangerous sort of feeling car that only an expert can drive. I mean, you look at a lot of our field, they're guys that have got relatively little motorsport experience that are doing some incredible lap times around here and loving every minute of it. The car's incredibly planted, it makes awesome rear downforce, it keeps the back end stable in the fast corners, and no, it's absolutely not just for show.
You mentioned this is the X1. I mean, is there a new car being developed, or are you going to stick with this design for the foreseeable future?
Correct, that second part. No new car. This is a spec category. There's no X2 or anything like that. So years of development into this to get something incredibly reliable and cost effective to run. It's now a fixed spec, so people can come in and be competitive. Cars can be sold in 5 years' time and still be competitive. It's a must-do feature of a category like this to fix the spec.
Dean did well on the track, winning 2 races to take the overall weekend win from Damon Sterling and Nico French. There was some good racing up front in Super TT, with Brent Edwards' Falcon XR6 taking all 4 races to lead home the Aston Martin of Ranald McClurkin. Steve Howard's Toyota dominated the under 2 litre sports sedans, holding off the front-wheel drive brigade of Linda Devlin and Damien Hunter. Dan Smith won in the battle of the Nissan Pulsars. And in the XLs, Brad James won the trophy class, while David Musgrave took out the Masters. Well, thank you for joining us here on In Pit Lane once again. I hope you enjoyed the show. Hope you enjoyed that wallow in nostalgia out at Calder Park. It was great to be out there again. Lots of enthusiasm out there. Lots of people very keen to get racing back out at Calder Park on a more regular basis. Later on in the year, the plans are to have a twilight meeting as part of the High Tech Oils National Series for the AASA. So that's coming in late November, early December. Also, plans are for a round of the Motorsport Australia Victorian State Circuit Racing Series to be held there later in the year as well, subject, of course, to track permits. But let's keep our fingers crossed and let's hope that happens. Now, over the next couple of weeks, as I said, we're coming back into the studio very, very soon. So really need to take a couple of weeks off to sort of start getting that all organised. A lot of work to be done, including, of course, trying to find sponsors to make it all happen. If you would like to help us out, if you would like to support In Pit Lane and get your message right across Melbourne to race fans everywhere, contact us here at In Pit Lane at advertise@inpitlane.com. We'd really like to hear from you and tell you how you can get on board with In Pit Lane for our brand new season starting on the 1st of September. But until we see you in a couple of weeks' time, there'll be shows next week, but they'll be old shows. hosted by an old man. That's until we see you again next week. Thanks for joining us. From all of us here at In Pit Lane. Well, it's just me, really. Bye for now. Web marketing, web design and custom software.